The rain fell in sheets against the windshield as Michael Parker pulled his beat-up sedan to the curb, the engine sputtering before dying completely. He stared at the gleaming high-rise before him, its lights cutting through the storm like a beacon. Inside that building, in exactly 17 minutes, he was supposed to meet the woman who could either save his daughter's life or crush what little hope he had left. And now his car was dead. Just like everything else in his life seemed to be lately. If you've ever felt like the universe was conspiring against you, if you've ever had to choose between your pride and your child's future, or if you've simply wondered what happens when two worlds that were never meant to collide suddenly crash into each other, this story might just break your heart before putting it back together again. If this journey resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that explore the depths of human resilience and connection. Michael checked his watch, a cheap timepiece with a cracked face, the only thing of his father's he still owned, and made a decision. Grabbing his worn portfolio and the small, framed photo of his daughter Emma that he brought to every interview for luck, he stepped out into the downpour. The cold rain soaked through his only good suit within seconds, but he barely noticed. After everything he'd been through in the past year, a little rain hardly registered. 6 blocks and 13 minutes later, Michael stood dripping in the marble lobby of Calloway Enterprises, trying not to look as desperate as he felt. His shoes squeaked against the polished floor as the receptionist eyed him with thinly veiled disdain. "I have an interview with Ms. Calloway," he said, his voice steadier than his hands. "Michael Parker, 7:30 appointment." The receptionist's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched higher. "Ms. Calloway doesn't conduct interviews after hours." "This one she does," came a voice from behind them. "Send him up when he's ready, Diane." Michael turned to find himself face to face with a woman whose picture he'd seen countless times in business magazines and news articles. Alexandra Calloway, 34 years old and already the CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the country. She was shorter than he expected, but her presence filled the cavernous lobby. "You're late, Mr. Parker," she said, her eyes taking in his drenched appearance without emotion. "My car broke down. I ran the last 6 blocks." He didn't mention that he couldn't afford a taxi, or that the car had been on its last legs for months. Some pride was all he had left. Something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps, or respect, before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Follow me." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent and tense. Michael tried not to stare at his own reflection in the mirrored walls, at the dark circles under his eyes, the way his once-fitted suit now hung loose on his frame. He'd lost 20 pounds since Emma got sick. Since his wife had walked out, unable to handle the pressure of a chronically ill child and mounting medical bills. Alexandra Calloway, by contrast, looked immaculate in a tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe knot that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and even sharper gaze. She didn't look like someone who would understand desperation. She looked like someone who had never known failure. Her office was exactly what he expected, minimalist, expensive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city lights below. The storm made them blur and dance, like stars falling to earth. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "Your resume is impressive, Mr. Parker. Senior software engineer at Nexus Tech for 8 years. Team lead on several major projects. And then, nothing for the past 10 months. Explain the gap." Michael took a deep breath. This was the moment that had ended his last 7 interviews. The moment when potential employers decided he was too much of a risk, too complicated, too burdened. "My daughter was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia last year. She needed full-time care, and my wife." He paused, the familiar pain catching in his throat. "My wife left. I had to step away from my career to take care of Emma." Alexandra's expression didn't change. "And now?" "Now she's stabilized. She's responding to treatment. She's in school part-time, and my mother helps when I can't be there. I need to work again." Not just for the money, though God knows we need it, but because I'm good at what I do. The best, actually. He hadn't meant to add that last part, but exhaustion had worn away his filter. To his surprise, Alexandra smiled, a small, tight thing, but genuine. Yes, I know. I've seen your work. The neural network you designed for Nexus's security protocol was brilliant. Unconventional, but brilliant. Michael blinked in surprise. That project had been his baby, something he'd poured his heart and soul into, but it had never been publicly attributed to him. Nexus had buried his name in the credits. How did you? I make it my business to know who's really behind the innovations in my industry, Mr. Parker. Not just who takes credit for them. She leaned forward, her eyes suddenly intense. I need someone who thinks differently. Someone who isn't afraid to challenge conventional approaches. The position I'm considering you for isn't just any coding job. It's leading a team that will be developing an AI system for medical diagnostics, specifically targeting rare diseases in children. Michael felt his heart stutter in his chest. It was as if the universe had suddenly aligned in his favor, offering not just a job but a purpose that spoke directly to his deepest pain. Why me? He asked, unable to keep the suspicion from his voice. Life had taught him that when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. Alexandra stood and walked to the window, her back to him as she watched the storm rage outside. Because you have something none of the other candidates have, Mr. Parker. You have skin in the game. This isn't just a project to you, it's personal. And in my experience, that makes all the difference. She turned back to face him, and for the first time, he noticed the shadows under her eyes, carefully concealed with makeup but visible now in the harsh overhead lighting. The salary is substantial. The benefits include comprehensive health insurance that would cover your daughter's treatments. The hours are flexible, you can work from home when needed. All I ask is your complete commitment to making this project succeed. It was everything he needed, wrapped up in a perfect package and handed to him by a woman who, by all accounts, was known for being ruthless in business. It made no sense. Why are you doing this? He asked, the words escaping before he could stop them. Alexandra's face hardened. That's not relevant to your employment, Mr. Parker. It is to me, he insisted, surprising himself with his boldness. I need to know what I'm walking into. For a long moment, she stared at him, and he was certain he'd just talked himself out of the opportunity of a lifetime. Then she sighed, a sound so weary it seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. My brother died of a rare form of cancer when he was 9 years old. I was 12. The doctors missed the diagnosis until it was too late because the symptoms mimicked more common conditions. If they'd had better tools, better technology. She shook her head. This project isn't just business for me either, Mr. Parker. It's personal. The confession hung in the air between them, unexpected and raw. Michael saw her differently now, not just as the untouchable CEO whose face graced magazine covers, but as someone who understood loss, who carried her own scars. I'll take the job, he said simply. Good. She nodded, composure regained. You start Monday. My assistant will email you the details. She extended her hand, and he stood to shake it. Her grip was firm, her skin cool against his palm. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Mr. Parker? One more thing. He paused at the door, looking back. Bring a picture of your daughter on Monday. I'd like to see who we're fighting for. The storm had subsided by the time Michael left the building, but his mind was still reeling from the encounter. He walked the 6 blocks back to his car in a daze, barely noticing the puddle soaking through his already wet shoes. When he reached the sedan, he sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the photo of Emma he'd brought for luck. His daughter smiled back at him from behind the glass, her bald head covered with a colorful scarf, her face thin but her eyes bright with the resilience that continually amazed him. She was only 8 years old but had already endured more than most adults. And now, for the first time in almost a year, he could offer her more than just his presence. He could offer her hope. The car, predictably, wouldn't start. But as Michael sat there in the quiet darkness, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. What he couldn't possibly know was just how profound that change would be, and that it had already begun the moment he stepped into Alexandra Calloway's office, dripping rainwater onto her expensive marble floors. The Calloway Enterprises building looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more like any other corporate headquarters. Michael arrived early on Monday morning, dressed in the new suit he'd splurged on over the weekend. Emma had helped him pick it out, insisting that, "Navy blue makes you look like a superhero, Dad." His team consisted of 5 other engineers, all brilliant in their own right, all clearly curious about the new guy who'd been brought in to lead them despite his employment gap. Michael felt their eyes on him as Alexandra introduced him, felt their assessment and, in some cases, their resentment. "Mr. Parker brings a unique perspective to this project," Alexandra told them, her tone making it clear that any objections would be unwelcome. "I expect you all to give him your full cooperation." She didn't mention his daughter or his circumstances, for which Michael was grateful. The last thing he wanted was pity from his new colleagues. The work was challenging and exhilarating. For the first time in nearly a year, Michael felt his mind fully engaged, wrestling with complex problems that demanded his complete attention. The AI system they were developing would analyze thousands of medical records, identifying patterns that human doctors might miss, potentially catching rare diseases in their earliest stages when treatment was most effective. Every evening, he would return home to Emma, who delighted in hearing about his day, even though much of the technical detail went over her head. She was looking better, the new treatment protocol was working, her blood counts improving steadily. Michael began to hope that maybe, just maybe, they were turning a corner. Alexandra was a demanding boss but a fair one. She attended every project meeting, asking incisive questions that pushed the team to think deeper, work harder. Michael found himself both intimidated by her intellect and inspired by her drive. She never mentioned their personal connection to the project again, maintaining a strictly professional relationship. Until the night everything changed. It was nearly midnight, and Michael was still at the office, wrestling with a particularly stubborn algorithm. The rest of the team had gone home hours ago, but he couldn't let go of the problem. It was too important. Every day they delayed was another day some child might go undiagnosed. "You should go home, Mr. Parker." He startled at Alexandra's voice, looking up to find her standing in the doorway of the conference room he'd commandeered. She'd changed from her usual business attire into jeans and a simple black sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, less formidable. "I could say the same to you, Ms. Calloway." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Alexandra, please. It's after hours." "Then I'm Michael." She nodded, then gestured to his computer screen. "Stuck? The pattern recognition module keeps generating false positives. I can't figure out why." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. Alexandra pulled up a chair beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. "Show me." For the next 2 hours, they worked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they leaned in to examine code or debate approaches. Michael was surprised to discover that beneath her executive exterior, Alexandra was still very much a programmer at heart. Her suggestions were insightful, her understanding of the problem intuitive. When they finally cracked it, a subtle flaw in the weighting algorithm that had been throwing off the entire system, they both sat back in their chairs, exhausted but triumphant. "We make a good team," Alexandra said quietly. "We do." Michael hesitated, then added, "Thank you. Not just for tonight, but for everything. This job, it's changed things for Emma and me. Her doctors are amazed at her progress. Alexandra's expression softened. I'm glad. How is she doing with the new school schedule? The question surprised him. He hadn't realized Alexandra was keeping track of such details. She's adjusting. It's hard for her, kids can be cruel about differences. But she's tough. Like her father. Alexandra's gaze was steady, appraising. You've been through hell, haven't you? The directness of the question caught him off guard. We've had our challenges. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. She stood abruptly, as if regretting the personal turn of the conversation. It's late. We should both go home. Michael nodded, gathering his things. They rode the elevator down together in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than that first night, companionable rather than tense. In the lobby, Alexandra hesitated. Do you need a ride? I remember your car troubles. I got it fixed, actually. The first thing I did with my signing bonus. He smiled, but then frowned as he looked outside. Though in this weather, I'm not sure it'll make it home. Another storm had rolled in while they worked, this one worse than the night of his interview. Rain lashed against the glass doors of the lobby, and the wind howled like a living thing. Alexandra followed his gaze. My driver can take you home. That's not necessary. I insist. It's not safe out there. Before he could protest further, she was on her phone, texting instructions. Minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up to the entrance. Thank you, Michael said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Alexandra nodded, then surprised him by saying, actually, I was about to grab something to eat. I haven't had dinner yet. Would you like to join me? The invitation hung between them, unexpected and laden with implications neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Michael thought of Emma, safe at his mother's house for the night. He thought of the mountain of medical bills still waiting to be paid, of the uncertain future that still loomed despite recent improvements. He thought of how long it had been since he'd had a conversation with an adult that wasn't about illness or finances or survival. I'd like that, he said simply. The restaurant Alexandra chose was small and unassuming, tucked away on a side street, not at all what Michael would have expected from someone of her status. The owner greeted her by name, leading them to a secluded table in the back without being asked. You come here often? Michael asked as they settled in. It was my brother's favorite place. She picked up the menu, but her eyes weren't focused on it. Our parents would bring us here to celebrate good news, a successful treatment, a good day, anything worth marking. After he died, I couldn't bear to come back for years. Now I come on his birthday every year. And sometimes when I need to remember why I do what I do. The vulnerability in her voice made something shift in Michael's chest. What was his name? David. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. He was the kindest person I've ever known. Even when he was in pain, he worried about everyone else. He used to save his dessert to share with the nurses. He sounds like Emma. She makes friendship bracelets for all the kids on her ward. Michael pulled out his phone, scrolling to a recent picture. This is from last week. Her hair is starting to grow back. Alexandra took the phone, studying the image of Emma sitting cross-legged on her hospital bed, surrounded by colorful threads and beads, her face alight with concentration. She's beautiful. She has your eyes. And her mother's stubbornness, Michael said without thinking, then winced. Sorry. I don't usually talk about Sarah.